Okay, this is our third section of the behaviors unit. It's the first part of two parts focusing on the media. There, this loosely aligns with chapter 7 in our textbook. All right, first phrase, you're going to notice there's going to be a lot of vocabulary words in there and then a lot of concepts that we have. Our first concept is mass media. Think about it as the TV, digital, radio, newspapers. Yes, all those things still are included. Means of popular communication. I have the quote on there from Bill Clinton. If I'm not on, there is a message, someone else is with their message, which Donald Trump has kind of lived up to that in his presidency and made sure that he is one that has it on there. Mass media, again, is not just the educated, it goes to the mass people. And again, print, radio, TV, digital, all the different types that you can have. One trend we have today is a lot of consolidation of this. Example will be Fox is on TV, they have radio, they also have digital. I do not believe they have anything in actual print anymore. Linkage institution, where this phrase we've had before, one of your linkage institutions is the media. It's what links you to the policymakers, what makes the policymakers link to you. Now, it's a lot easier for you to see what the policymakers are than the other way around, but this is where we take from our last section that you could possibly have with either conventional or unconventional participation to get their notice. The traditional role of the media, and we'll come back to this in the next section, though, is to be the watchdog of it. They are supposed to watch government. They are going to go and they're supposed for the citizens and let them know. Some people will say that it was like one of the pillars of government. I have a quote there from Jefferson: if I had to choose between government without newspapers and newspapers without government, I would not hesitate to prefer the latter. Problem we have today comes down to ratings. With mass media, they are to try to make money. So if you are an internet site, you want to get clicks. If you are a TV station, you need to have eyes on you and have high ratings. Same is true for radio. You need to have sales if you're print media. So this is where we will end up with that ratings race that we have. First vocabulary for our current trend you need to know is narrowcasting. Normally you think of narrowcasting with like ESPN with the sports audience or Disney Channel for kids, but this is where for Fox News, MSNBC, even CNN right now, where they're kind of more the anti-Trump, not really liberal but not really conservative, and they're there, but this is where they've kind of found their niche for the anti-Trump area here. Again, you want to have certain audience. Here's a key thing that you will notice: younger viewers less likely to view broadcast news. So the 6:30 ABC, NBC, CBS News, very few young people will watch that, but old people still do. Younger people are less likely to watch CNN, Fox, and MSNBC than older people also. This is where you'll see an AP question that focuses on this. This one College Board really likes was selective exposure, and this is where it's kind of the old preaching to the choir. And so if you're a conservative, you watch Fox News, you go onto internet sites that will tell you what you want to hear, even though we can be a lot more educated. If you're a conservative, you could go to Huffington Post, but no, you want to go to see what you want to see there. And that is what's called selective exposure that you have. All right, this was an interesting graphic that I saw. The map on the left is the 2016 electoral map. If you break it, go then on the map on the right, you will see that whether the sub-region is that they have a higher viewership by Fox or a higher viewership by CNN. The map is exactly the same except for the state of Nevada. So that tells you with that selective exposure, where people are watching with what they want in here. I'm not going really in depth with the history side of this. This is a quick review. Some of you, that if you were in AP US history, you had some parts of this that you went more into detail. Early on in the history, we have our newspapers, they're regionals in there. Even before we were country, we have pamphlets there. that we have. But our regional newspapers were definitely biased. I can say that I always kind of can forgive some things for people in the 1800s, because if you lived in Boston or you lived in Charleston, you really didn't know what other areas thought there. Where today, we shouldn't have selective exposure. You can educate yourself on others in there. Yellow journalism, especially at the time of the Spanish-American War. This is for the newspapers that we'll have when they sensationalize the news. This is what is happening a lot on TV today. Or internet also has this. Again, they are trying to sell newspapers in the past. Here's where they're trying to get viewers. Radio in the 1920s to the 1950s. Television takes over in the 1950s today. Used to be the three major networks. Now we have a bunch of different networks that we have. The internet, once it comes about in the late 80s, we will have it, and today there. Current trend again is media consolidation, where these things are all put together from the same entity. Historical events to remember. Oh, wouldn't the president love it if they had what Hoover did? He would tell the press to write him the questions. He would then come back the next day and give you an answer. There. No way that he was going to mess up with things once he got with his experts, and they could kind of practice it almost like a little pre-debate. FDR with the fireside chats using the radio. There. Told a little story in class about how he also won the elections where they would basically buy out an hour or half-hour time period. And one time he found out that his opponent had the next hour after on the radio station. So after he finished at 59 minutes, he went completely silent for a minute. While he was silent, people turned to the other stations thinking that the station had gone dead. And then when his opponent went on the radio for a time that they had bought, people were switched to another channel. FDR was a very crafty politician. Richard Nixon, he will have it where he gets famous for using on the checkers speech when he was as a vice presidential candidate in 1952. But 8 years later, in our first televised debate, where he will not use TV to his advantage, and Kennedy will in that debate there. Also for the history side, where we looked a little bit before in the past, but what was the effect where using the TV for Vietnam, Watergate, where the government's saying one thing, but then people are seeing the other thing on TV there. So this is where you kind of see the fact of the media there. This was actually yesterday there, but in 1947, our first ever televised address was by Truman. Again, it'll be in the 50s for TV. 1960, again, first debate that we have. In the past, if you had journalism, you worked at beat. So you would start out and you might be, for like a local newspaper, you have to cover something that may not be real exciting there. Maybe you have to go and basically you're going through and the arrest reports and you're writing stories with that. But you would work your way up. So even every newspaper would have their reporters that maybe then you go to Washington, D.C. And so, yes, you're from a small town newspaper, but you're able to go and report. Today, we don't have that. I gave the example in Tallahassee. When the Florida legislature's not in session, the only two newspapers that keep reporters there are the Tallahassee Democrat and now the Tampa Bay Times. It used to be the Miami Herald also. So a lot of things can happen in Tallahassee that the only way they're going to have stories besides those two newspapers will be AP, Reuters, Script Towers, or some of those subscription services. Even in Washington, D.C., very few newspapers now have someone on that beat. They use the other sources. So even though we have more people, we have more media outlets, we actually have less journalists on the ground that are professional journalists. We'll address later on where we have people that are their own journalists. Things that have changed over time. There used to be a thing called the fairness doctrine. In the late 70s, early 80s, that went away. What the fairness doctrine was that if, let's say that where Sean Hannity had President Trump on TV had it for 29 minutes, you would have to have 29 minutes with an opponent or someone from the other party. That is no longer true. So again, there is no more fairness doctrine. Reason that changed is you can go to different channels, and there's so many opportunities now. Another thing that we have had in the last 20 years that has come is what is called infotainment, and basically the comedy news, Daily Show, Samantha Bee. You can go to various podcasts, get this. The point counterpoint was something that was famous in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We now have gone to basically panels here. Now I had the question, how is it abused? MSNBC, Fox both do the same sort of thing, it's just reversed. So like on MSNBC, they will have a panel of 4, they'll have 3 liberals, they'll have 1 conservative. But they're not going to pick a moderate conservative or a pragmatic. They're going to pick someone that's extremely reactionary, someone that's more extreme. And again, it's kind of the selective exposure. It's to help their viewers that, oh yeah, well they've got extremism. Again, Fox does the same thing when they have their liberal that they have. Another thing for today is it's not so much reporters or talking heads. A lot of things that are on news stations aren't news. Sean Hannity, Rachel Maddow are not news. Those are opinion shows. In the past, what would happen is someone like Walter Cronkite would do the news. He might have some bias in it, but for the most part, he tried to stay unbiased. Then on certain nights of the week, he would have a chance to have an editorial. This is where, like in 1968, he will then be opposed to the Vietnam War there. But that's where, again, what on panels things, a lot of this has changed over the last couple of decades. Some other current trends. One, sound bites get less and less and less. If you are running for a campaign, you are trying to get those zingers that are going to not only be the sound bites that are going to be played over and over again, but that someone was going to make viral there. Negative coverage. People always say they want more good news. No, that's not true. The bad news sells, and that is why we have gone so much more to unfavorable news than in the past. And that trend just continues to get more and more that we have. All right, here's a chart, and the main thing that I point out here is when you look at the years, we have it for news consumption by age, and we focus on this. Local TV, 18 to 29-year-olds, only 18% will watch it. Network TV, only 8%. Cable TV. So, 18 to 29-year-olds are not getting their news off of TV. Meanwhile, the other extreme, 65 and older, 57, 49, 58. So older people are. Now, that's a fact you do have to know. The way that an AP question will word this is not only where you maybe have to read that graph, but you would have to in a way, design a campaign there. So what are you going to do to make sure that there's certain things that you can get on the local news that 65 years old and older will want? So you're going to have to make sure you do a media event for something that is going to be with Social Security or Medicare. But since younger people aren't doing that, how are you going to reach them there? So again, it's not just the facts that you have to know. You have to kind of apply that and show in your writing using the media here. Okay, different political science ideas that you have. Again, that age difference with the charts in here. Also, the fact that very little is actually edited stories. Most of them are, again, basically the pundits talking up there. The role of the reporter is more like on radio anymore, which is why Sean Hannity's currently our top-rated person on TV. Well, he's very good on talk radio, and he's able to have that. It's a lot more charged there, and on both sides there. And this is where saying that you know in journalism there, what sells? Is it man bites dog or dog bites man? So again, you want to go with the more extreme. You want to have things Chris Rock was recently on Saturday Night Live and was talking about how Sean Hannity, the reason why he has such good ratings is he's got people scared there. A lot of the important topics are ignored. You don't do trivial, you don't want to do complex things. We're going to see in next that a lot of times are spent on polls or where the candidates are there and what should be done and not going deep into this. A lot more on the polls in recent time because that's easy to talk about. I have the question, what's the defense of a superficial media? And this is that's what Americans want. We're a capitalistic country. So if that's what the public wants and people choose to watch that, then that's what we'll have. The chart on the right is probably hard for you to read in the video, But this is where it goes to where people think that are sources, and again, if they're liberal, conservative, more so. So some of the things like on the top, The Economist, people that are basically liberal agree with it, for the most part conservative. The one that's straight across that pretty much is agreed to be reliable straight across is Wall Street Journal. Some of these, like if you look, the New York Times, Washington Post, people that are liberal and moderate say that it is something that is reliable. People that are conservative then say they don't. Same with NSBC. But you reverse it with Fox News. So liberals say it's not reliable, moderates say that it is, conservatives say that. Then you go all the way down to the bottom. The one thing that all groups say is not reliable is BuzzFeed. There. Meanwhile, you have like the Rush Limbaugh show that liberals say that's not, and then extreme conservatives say that it is. This is a little bit older. This is pre-Trump. You can probably find this in various things if you look it up, but you can kind of see from right to left, conservative, liberal. But the higher that it is basically pretty much more complex and better journalism there. Simplistic when it's down below. So like for the top selling newspaper, USA Today, they're saying at this time that it's pretty much in the middle, but it's very low. CNN the same way that you have. The next one is a little bit better because this was basically after Trump that they adapted it here. So in 2018, you'll notice CNN gets a little more detailed there, but it does shift more to the liberal side. You notice MSNBC is liberal. Fox actually shifted down once Trump was president, but more conservative. But there's some things that you look on the extremes. Occupy Democrats, that is not only basically low level, but extremely biased in here. InfoWars on the right. You see on the top AP, Reuters, Bloomberg. These are the news services that are seen to be the most neutral for what you have, but also being complex there. This is from 2018, but so TikTok's not on here. I would think that TikTok would probably be about the same level of Instagram. There, about 8% people giving it, but you may not think Facebook, but Grandma's on Facebook, and Grandma uses Facebook to get a lot of her news there that you have. Here's a little cartoon from when Obama was there, and this is kind of with the media. Benghazi and Fast and Furious were scandals that occurred during the Obama administration. So cartoons basically saying that the media is sheep to what Obama says.